I did one of those full body MRI scans called
Pronovo.
Pronovo.
We should talk about this. This is something I need to get on.
Yeah. So, you know what? Honestly, it was like, I don't know if it was my mom getting cancer. I think I did it before that. But like, I was just one of those things where I got to the stage in life where I had a couple little girls and I'm like, Tia was telling me, he was like, hey, you can do these. You're at the age now where it makes sense. See if anything shows up. They can detect like it's something like 80% of cancers at stage 1, which is amazing. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, let's do it. So I went and did it 2 years ago, came back, all the standard stuff like, oh, we see this here, but that's normal, blah, blah, blah. Like this is a little bit weird. You have an extra vertebrae, which I actually do, which is weird. So
a little vestigial tail.
Yeah, exactly. A bunch of shit like that.
Ladies.
So I do that, and then I go for year 2, and I go and get the scan again, and they call me up, and they're like, yeah, it turns out you have a little brain aneurysm, a little small brain aneurysm, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, this is crazy. Okay, tell me more. And then after the fact, like a month later, or not a month later, but a few weeks later, my doctor calls them and says, hey, what do we see on the first scan? They found it on the first scan as well. It hadn't changed, which is great. Yeah. And it's super tiny. It's the smallest. My doctor said if they hadn't been using the latest tech, they wouldn't even have detected it at all because it was so small. So it's only 1 millimeter, and they don't treat them till they get to 7 millimeters. Yeah. So it's like, it's totally fine. You want to keep your blood pressure low and all that. But it's also, it's weird because in some sense, like you want to detect those stage 1 cancers, but there's a lot of false positives. Not that this is a false positive. It's something to pay attention to. Certainly changing my dietary actions in terms of keeping sodium low and like lowering my blood pressure. Yeah. But it's something you should do.
Which is why we're having croissants and coffee tomorrow.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's not going to mess with my blood pressure.
I'm just fucking with you.
But, it's
so,
like...
I mean, was that... I would imagine that to be terrifying.
Yeah. It's 45 minutes, so it's fast.
Not the procedure. The review of the results.
Yeah, I mean, you go through it, and I have a couple spots on my brain, and they told me you're allowed 1 per decade. And so, like, you're fine. You have, 2 or 3 or whatever. That's fine. I'm like, okay, this still doesn't sound good. Like,
don't worry. Yeah. It's like a bruised apple, but that's fine.
Yeah, and then they're like, your lymph nodes. This is the first scan. They're like, your lymph nodes are really swollen on the left side. I'm like, cool. Like, what does that mean? And they're like, did you get your COVID vaccine on that side? I'm like, yeah, I did. And they're like, okay, that's why. And then that would turn out to being fine. And then, they found like some other shit. Like there's a little bit of like a little
tail.
No, there's like a little like I have this little tiny bulge in my right nutsack. It's kind of like the little stringy thing that connects to the sack kind of bulged out a little bit. And they're like, that's totally normal. It's not cancer. You're fine, blah, blah. So like, it's just little shit like that where you're just like, cool.
Oh my God. I can't wait until our random shows when we're like in our 60s and 70s. It's just going to be a litany of injuries and prostate complaints.
Exactly.
Oh my God. So let me just rewind. So I make sure, just make sure I'm hearing you correctly. So were you pissed that they did not, if it hadn't changed? Yeah. That they didn't spot it first time around.
I think it was so small that they have different. It's not a radiologist, whoever it is that reviews it.
It's probably a radiologist.
I think it is. I think the first part was like, this is so insignificant, I don't even need to call it out. And the second one called it out. Yeah, they were just like, and then they compared the notes, and it was fine. This is the story I haven't told. A friend of mine went in, had a scan. They found a growth in his brain. Non-cancerous, decent size, operated, removed it. He's fine, but he didn't even know he had it. And he was just going in for a thing, and it was growing. Yeah. And it saved his life, most likely.
Yeah, that's wild.
And so it's shit like that. And the radiologist, when I talked to him, he said the number, he goes, I don't really drink. He goes, but the number of bottles of wine I get in the mail from people that are like, you saved my life because you found this at stage 1 or stage 2. I don't know. It's just one of those things where
get your diagnostics, folks. And I mean, do it more. Hesitate to say this, but like, don't push out the interval. If you're supposed to get something every 5 years, if anything, get it more frequently. Don't push it out. I have recently had the opposite experience with a friend of mine who went in for a routine exam, stage 4 cancer, terminal.
Holy shit.
And I just spent several days with him, and
what type of cancer?
Not because I don't want to give specifics, just in case people like triangulate stuff, but it's metastasized. And at this point, surgery, at least some types of surgery, don't make any sense. And man, if you want a proof point for what someone can do with decades of meditation practice, he is incredibly upbeat. He's super happy. He is as productive as he can be. He's spending a lot of time with loved ones, of course, but he is consciously choosing, of all the decision trees, a path of gratitude and not naive optimism, but optimism in the sense of looking at everything as the glass half full. And I was so inspired by this because I'm going through some hard stuff myself, and to see someone in those circumstances able to demonstrate that, it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
And I know him well enough, and we've had enough interactions. I know it is not an act. It is not an act. And I'm really impressed because that's not automatically the case. I mean, there are people, including famous meditators who are world famous teachers, who on their deathbeds or in the process of going through hospice just say over and over again to their closest friends, like, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. And they're afraid, which is understandable. I might be that person. I mean, certainly I have no confidence that I would end up responding the way my friend is responding, but it's been incredibly inspiring.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, it's certainly sad in its own way, but a real gift that he's also giving those around him. It's incredible.
How are you dealing with all that?
You mean with his
situation?
Be hard
being a friend, having a friend go through something like that, you know? Are you going to see him again, do you think, before he passes, or is it something
I would like to. I would like to. I mean, I don't know how long the time horizon is. It may not be that long. I am doing well with it because of how he is able to choose to respond to this unfolding story. Yeah. Of course, it's sad on a number of levels, right? But I mean, we all have a one-way ticket as far as we know.
Yeah.
You know,
my dad, before he passed, said there's no lease on life. He just like wanted to remind me of that. Like,
yeah.
It's like, you know, it's coming for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not something you want to think about all the time.
Right.
But if you think about it none of the time, you also have a problem. And this has been a very strong reminder for me. It's like, yeah, get it together, you know, like
when I had,
don't dick around too much, like have fun. Don't take everything seriously, but also realize that like every moment you have like this, not to get all cheesy, but it's like, these are precious, amazing moments.
Yeah.
Everybody's healthy.
Yeah. I think about that with my girls every day, dude, the kids.